Joining us today is Nilgün Arısan Eralp, a leading expert on Turkey-EU relations and director of EU affairs at the Economic Policy Research Foundation of Turkey. She has been a vocal commentator on Turkey's evolving place in the global order. Today, we will be discussing Turkey's foreign policy, its relationship with the US and the EU, recent domestic political developments, and the future of Greek-Turkish relations. Thank you so much for joining us today in Elia Med's podcast series.
Thanks for your interest.
Well, Turkey's relationship with the United States has seen its ups and downs, especially in the areas of defense and NATO cooperation. Where do you see the current state of US-Turkey ties, and what are the key factors shaping this relationship today?
Currently, the relations seem to be improving. The key issue, as you mentioned as well, is defense. What will Turkey do with S-400 missiles? I mean, there are rumors that they will be placed in Syria, but we are not sure. Turkey will find a way not to get rid of these S-400, but to put them somewhere else. I think committing itself not to use them at all wouldn't help. But as I said at the beginning, things seem to be improving. Probably Turkey will be able to get F-16s. You know that Turkey was almost thrown out from F-35 program, and the F-35s were not given to Turkey because Turkey bought S-400s. I think a solution will be found to that, a solution that both sides, both Turkey and US will agree on. And the reason at the time being for the rapprochement is also Trump's US to withdraw from Middle East. Of course, I mean, US is very much interested in the stability in the Middle East, in Israel's security still, but they want to solve the problems with hands-off approach. So Turkey can be a good ally for United States. Until now, recent developments show that Turkey can be a good ally. I mean, Turkey left the relations between Syria and Israel to Syria, is not complaining anything about, hasn't said, we haven't heard official statements coming from Turkish officials on Israel's bombing Syria. Turkey is not openly criticizing Israel's efforts, and also maybe Trump is thinking that Turkey can act as an intermediary in the supposed talks between US and Iran. So US thinks Turkey will be helpful, having good relations with Turkey will be helpful for the stability of the region, which is surrounded by many instabilities, Ukraine war going on, Gaza going on, although Trump keeps changing its policy vis-a-vis Gaza. Fortunately, recently, it seems we are all expecting that he would recognize Palestine, but we are not sure about that. Of course, although things seem to be improving, both leaders, both Turkish leader and Trump, their policies are quite unpredictable. I remember the days around 2018, summer 2018, when relations seemed to go very well. Then suddenly there was this Pastor Brunson case. Turkey detained him, and Trump wrote, I will bluntly say, a very rude letter to Turkish president to release Pastor, and we faced with serious sanctions. And finally, the Pastor were released, of course. So, I mean, we cannot predict the future, but for the time being, relations seem to be going well.
And what about Turkey's rapport with the European Union that has been increasingly strained in recent years? Do you think there is still a realistic path forward for closer Turkey-EU integration, or are we witnessing a long-term strategic drift?
Turkey's integration to the EU, I mean, being a member or reinitiating the accession process, they don't seem to be realistic nowadays, given the huge gap between the domestic political situation in the country and the Copenhagen political criteria. Before the Trump tsunami, if I may call it so, I mean, relations were reduced to cooperation in migration. And more, Turkey was losing its candidate status, de facto losing its candidate status to be a partner and sometimes being regarded as an adversary or at least a neighbor that has to be controlled, an unpredictable neighbor that has to be contained with. But with the Trump tsunami, with the weakening of the transatlantic relations, and the ongoing Russian-Ukrainian war, Turkey started to mean something for European defense. Even after the Assad's fall in Syria, the Commission President von der Leyen came to Turkey, of course, for migration issues. They were afraid of more migrants coming to Europe. And I mean, Turkey was invited to the Coalition of the Willing meetings in UK and in France to talk about how to pop up European defense against the withdrawal of US when the Russian threat is over there. Turkey can be considered a fence-sitting country regarding its relations with Russia, but until now, it is supporting the territorial integrity of Ukraine. It accepts that this is a war, not an operation, not a military operation. Turkey implemented the Montreux Convention. So, I mean, until now, Turkey's track record is not very bad vis-à-vis Russia. And maybe you heard it. I mean, suddenly Putin proposed to meet with Zelensky in Istanbul, and Zelensky said he would be waiting for Putin there, although European leaders first expect a ceasefire from Russia before these peace talks begin, but I don't know whether Putin would accept it or not. So Turkey's importance as a defense partner started to increase. But I don't think Turkey will have an institutional, structural defense cooperation with the EU as a whole. There will be bilateral links with member states, as we witnessed the other day with Italy. Erdogan visited Italy. Meloni welcomed him because there would be a joint venture between a Turkish company, drone company, Baykar, and the Leonardo company of Italy. There will be such cooperations. Some member states will buy ammunition from Turkey. They will make use of the industrial infrastructure of defense that is becoming very strong in Turkey. But I don't think Turkey will become a part of the defense institution or defense institutional structure of defense of EU, like Turkey is not accepted to PESCO projects. Turkey is not being able to benefit from the European Defense Fund still. These are the signs that Turkey will not be a institutional and structural part of EU's defense architecture. Just before the arrest of 19th of March, there were talks that EU might start negotiations for customs union modernization and visa facilitation, not visa liberalization, but visa facilitation for some groups, for business people, for exchange students might begin. But I'm afraid after the 19th of March arrest, we'll not be able to see the realization of even these customs union modernization and visa facilitation, but we can see cooperation with member states. And also, maybe you heard about it, just before the change in the government in Germany changed its mind to sell Eurofighters to Turkey. We haven't heard anything from the other partners, I mean Spain and UK, but Germany, the leading partner. I don't know what Mer's government will decide on that, but we will see.
Now, you talked about the arrest and political targeting of Istanbul Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu has raised serious concerns about the state of democracy in Turkey. What does this signal about the government's approach to opposition voices ahead of the next elections?
It's not only İmamoğlu that is being detained. Some other potential candidates for presidency are also in prison, like Selahattin Demirtas, and recently, a few months ago, head of a nationalist party, Zafer Party, Glory Party's head, Ümit Özdağ. They are both in prison. But of course, the recent arrest of 19th of March increased the serious question marks about the state of democracy in Turkey. I mean, you can blame a mayor with corruption, but I mean, you can put him under investigation, but that's no reason to detain him and his aides. Most of his team are in prison now as well. We all now question the rule of, AKP supporters as well, some members of the AKP as well. And some previous members of AKP, like Ali Babacan, he was the Minister of Economy during various AKP governments. Today in T24, there was an interview with him. He also claims that there are people, even AKP supporters, are not convinced the reasons behind the arrest of İmamoğlu are legal. They all think that that's a political issue, and these brought question marks to our minds about the state of Turkish democracy, about the state of rule of law, about the independence and impartiality of the judiciary now.
Well, Greek-Turkish relations have experienced renewed tensions over maritime boundaries and energy exploration. But do you think that we are headed toward another period of confrontation, or is there a room for genuine diplomatic progress? Because although there are tensions, now Athens and Ankara talk, and that's important.
After the 6th of February 2023 earthquake in Turkey, things started to improve between Greece and Turkey. Turkish people were really affected by Greek rescue workers coming first to rescue the people who were seriously affected from the earthquake, and then things started to improve. People also claim that because of the instabilities surrounding our neighborhood, Germany also played a crucial role in bringing together Turkey and Greece, but I'm not sure about it, but there are talks ongoing like that. There are many channels of dialogue now between the parties. There is this positive agenda where foreign ministers meet. I mean, there are not civil society, but civilians and military people, they come together. Business dialogue started again. Exploratory talks started. So there are many channels of dialogue. Unfortunately, until now, they managed the conflict, but there hasn't been any concrete solution to the conflict. There are many conflict areas. You mentioned one of them, delimitation, militarization of the island. Cyprus problem has always been there. Well, there are minorities problem are also there, but people started to talk. And the other day I heard both Erdogan and then Greek foreign minister claiming that there's nothing bad in the relations. They will meet again soon in the informal summit of foreign ministers of NATO countries. I think this dialogue is important. Of course, I mean, they don't talk about, we don't know what they talk about, the leaders, because there's nothing leaking out of it. I hope no news is good news. But also they don't start the negotiations on crucial problems, as far as I know. They just talk, they state their positions to each other. I mean, for the time being, there is nothing preventing us to be optimistic. We'll see, let me say. Next week in Ankara, there will be Turkish-Greek forum again that will take in our premises, in my think tank's premises. So this thinking, maybe I was writing just my presentation for Eliamet tomorrow. Maybe if think tanks can jump in and make some projects on topics that are that are of mutual interest to both sides, and if EU can finance these, EU and both countries can finance these projects, we can integrate more, and this current peace can be more sustainable. Of course, it all depends on what would happen in Cyprus as well. People talk about our president's statements regarding his recent visit to the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus. I think that's for domestic consumption, and that was also, he was addressing the Turkish Cypriots over there. There were some protests in the northern part of the island, maybe heard about them, regarding the secular nature. And also to the domestic consumption inside the country. And also, there will be presidential elections in Cyprus next autumn. The leading candidate now is the head of the CTP, Tufan Erhürman. I listened to him, I read him in different occasions. He is pro-solution politician. He is quite rational, and he's a pro-solution politician. And who knows, maybe both sides might again sit on the table to put an end to this problem finally.
We have to be hopeful, and
Yes.
hopefully we will keep talking. I think that's very, very
Yes,
important.
that's very important.
Yes,
I
as
agree.
you said. In a time of global realignment and regional instability, where do you see Turkey positioning itself? As a bridge between East and West, or as an increasingly independent regional power charting its own path?
Turkey tries to see itself as a regional leader, as a key regional player, trying to drive its own path. But I think in our world, it is impossible for middle powers like Turkey to draw their own path. You have to, Turkey, it has always been the case. When Turkey was closer to Europe, to European Union, Turkey's, how shall I say, Turkey's status with the Middle East, let me say, has always been stronger. And also, to be a regional leader, there has to be the willingness coming from the country itself, our leaders, have the same. There has to be an how shall I say, demand coming from the region itself. That demand is not that visible nowadays, and you have to have the capacity. Unfortunately, economically, especially after 19th of March arrest, Turkey has become very fragile. So Turkey has to cooperate with, if you ask me, with the West, especially with Europe, because we don't know what US will do regarding transatlantic relations. It will cooperate more with the West to be an important regional player. Nowadays, you can't be a solo regional player. That's what I think.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this discussion.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.